It's time for Morning Soulshine with Bridget, a podcast where we interview people who express their stories of triumph. I'm your host, certified life and mindset coach, Bridget Gibson. Hi guys, this is Bridget with Morning Soulshine, and on this month is October, and it's Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And all month long, we're going to be recognizing people who have made such strides in stopping and trying to help people bring awareness to domestic violence. So all month, we're going to be dedicating Morning Soulshine to domestic violence. And on today, we have a very, very special guest. And I am so proud to have her with me. On last year, she did some videos for us and she went viral. Guys, I was so amazed at all the contacts that she made through this, these videos. And we're just so appreciative of her. And her name is attorney Angela Gatlin Keys. And I'm going to read her bio to you guys. And look, guys, when you hear about her journey, you're going to be like, yes, that's her. That is her all the way. So Angela Gatlin Keys was born in Shreveport, Louisiana, the last of 7 children. She was always called the smarty pants of the family for her grades and for her mouth. She first learned that she liked helping the little people when she was a sophomore in high school. Her father, who served as union and labor president at the VA hospital, made her sit down one night and write out a grievance complaint against one of the supervisors who had wronged a nurse's aide. She enjoyed the process so much that she began to help her dad on a regular basis. They would often sit at the kitchen table and hash out the complaints, study the regulations, and write out formal complaints. This father-daughter collaboration resulted in a changed environment for the VA employees during his tenure and sparked Angela's interest in the law. After graduating from the University of Louisiana at Lafayette, she married her college sweetheart and they began a family. A few years later, Angela fulfilled her lifelong dream and was accepted at Loyola University School of Law in New Orleans. She started law school with 2 small children and graduated with 3. At one point, everyone in the household was in the school, and the kids did their homework together with her at the library. She practiced a variety of law disciplines for several years and then assumed a position with the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeal. In 2005, Hurricane Katrina forced her family to relocate to Shreveport, where they remained longer than they planned. They eventually landed in the DFW area in 2014. She became the licensed attorney in Texas in 2016, a licensed realtor in 2018, and published her first book, which is based on her blog, A Woman's Wit, in July 2020. Angela is the mother of 3 and the Gigi of 1 grandbaby, affectionately called Ladybug. She's also a member of Delta Sigma Theta sorority and has served as praise and worship leader minister of music at a variety of churches for most of her adult life. Thank you so much, Angela, for being with us.
Thank you so much, Bridget, for inviting me. I'm happy to be here, but I do have one correction to my bio. I thought I sent you the updated version, but now I have 2 grandbabies.
You have 2 grandbabies. That's a blessing.
I can't leave off the littlest one who's almost 1, my baby Julius, and we call him Juju. That's my Juju bug.
Ladybug and Juju.
Ladybug and Juju bug, and they are gorgeous and sweet, and I can't wait to get my hands on them.
Oh, that's such a blessing. No, we don't want to leave Juju bug off. We don't want to leave him off. And we just really thank you so much for being with us. And Attorney Keys, with October being Domestic Violence Month, I just felt like it was so important to ask you to come and have a conversation with us and talk about the legal issue issues regarding domestic violence in the courts. And one of the first things I would like to talk about, because a lot of people don't understand restraining orders. Can you talk about restraining orders and the importance of being active with whenever you file one, and exactly how to fill it out?
Well, restraining orders are pretty uniform. There's been a lot of discussion. There's a lot of debate and opinions out there about restraining orders. Some people say that they are effective. Some say they're nothing but a piece of paper that do nothing to protect domestic violence victims. And it's true that restraining orders alone may not prohibit domestic violence, but it may not deter it completely. But I think it does act as a deterrent in some cases because there are certain repercussions if a restraining order is filed against a defendant and it is granted, then there are some rights that they lose as a result of having that restraining order levied against them. And so if it gives them pause and it makes them stop what they're doing for fear that they may, for instance, lose the ability to own a firearm, because that is one of the penalties, then and we know that is important to a lot of people. Then if that is able to slow them down just long enough for the victim to get away and gather herself or himself together and get to safety, then it has done its job. And so, but the most important thing about restraining orders, as I said, they are pretty uniform across the United States. There may be small differences that you encounter, but there is the restraining order is what we called, it's something, an order that you can get without the other side being heard, the temporary order. And so we know that once people go into court, both sides have to have the opportunity, they have to have notice so that they know that they can appear, so that whatever proceeding is going on, they have a right to be heard and a right to tell their side of the story. But often in domestic violence cases, because of the emergency nature of it, the temporary restraining orders are granted what we call ex parte. And that means just on the sworn word of one party. And it's only used in cases of emergency when you don't have time to, set a hearing because, in some jurisdictions, it may take 2 or 3 months to get into court. So restraining orders are always set immediately. The petitioner or the plaintiff, the victim, will go into court and fill out the application, and then it goes immediately to the judge, and the judge will rule on it. And then some jurisdictions, the ruling has to be made within 24 to 48 hours, as soon as possible, because of the emergency nature of the proceeding. And so when I would counsel domestic violence victims, it's very important that they fill them out correctly, because if they are not done so, and it can be automatically thrown out and there's no protection at all. And as I said, they're usually very uniform. You have to put your name, but because of the nature of domestic violence, you don't have to put your address. For instance, if you're in a shelter or you had to escape the family home to get out and you're hiding someplace. So you can't put your address on there because, once it's served on the offending party, they'll know exactly where you are. Yes. So they are able to keep that information private, and it doesn't go on the order itself, just, for security purposes. And there are certain features of it. Usually the standard wording is that I, swear that on this day the defendant did, and then it goes through a litany of abuses. Did hit, push, kick, scratch, you know.
So they need to be specific when they're filling this out.
Just a catch-all. And some people, and I have seen people they just check that box. But what they should do is be very specific, because there's also a section where they can write out what happened. And they can give tell the details of the particular incident, whatever it was that prompted them to go ahead. Okay, this is the final straw.
Okay.
And it's best that they write that information out and be as specific as possible, because this is what is going to sway or persuade the judge whether or not this order needs to be signed. And so if you just have if you just check boxes off, they won't see the urgent nature and why the order needs to be entered. So you have to, in essence, plead your case on that piece of paper.
Okay. And now, as far as evidence, would it be important to have evidence?
Definitely important to have evidence. I often, when in the middle of a domestic violence incident, or maybe in the aftermath, the victim may call the police, and a lot of them say, well, I didn't take pictures because the police took pictures. But sometimes those photographs, get lost. They don't get that attached, or you can't get to them, because it's evidence. And if they go into, the evidence room, sometimes they just get lost, or you can't get a hold of them in time to file your petition. So you always need to take pictures. If you have any injuries, take pictures, document everything that happens. If you have a black eye, or, broken arm, or if they punched a hole in the wall, or, whatever, whatever evidence you have to show the gravity of the situation, make sure you document that, because you will need that in order to prove up your case.
This is such great information, because, I guess when you're going through domestic violence, everything is so chaotic, and you're not thinking about what do I do next. Right. So by you telling us about the restraining order and exactly what needs to be done. And a lot of times people have no idea what is a restraining order, they're not quite sure what to do when going through such a tragedy in their life. And, by you telling us this is going to help so many women who are in a situation and really don't know what to do and where to go. So what you're saying is, so if there's a incident at the house and the police is called, correct? So at that point, the police take the report. How does that work?
The police will just, they will assess the situation. They will say, figure out, okay, their job. Once upon a time, they would just take the man away automatically. But now they look for the first aggressor, and it doesn't matter if it was the male or the female. Gender no longer matters. Who was the aggressor in this situation? And they may or may not, depending on, the circumstances, take that person to jail. Or they may tell one of them, okay, you need to leave the home. And, the one of them may say, well, I want to leave, but can you stay with me, or can you make him leave until I can get my things together, and then I can leave and he can come back, or whatever the situation, may be. Of course, if it's, a really egregious situation, someone is going to jail, or if someone needs to go to the hospital because of injuries. But the police will simply assess the situation, write a report, and you can also use that report as evidence to support your protective order requests. The police don't file the protective order, but the report that they complete as a result of coming to the scene, you can also use that, or you may have to subpoena it. It depends on the jurisdiction where you are, but you can use that to attach as further proof that, this incident happened on this day. The police were called and this is what they wrote up. And they said that, they found that he did this to me or she did that. And as a result, he was taken away or, again, made to leave the home, whatever the disposition may be.
Now, you're brought in as a lawyer. You're brought in if it's only a case where there's children involved, or is it for the court, the trial itself?
Well, children, it doesn't matter if children are involved or not. It could be just, it could be, I'm sorry, whether or not children are involved has no bearing on whether or not the protective order is going to be granted or is needed. Exactly. Okay. So
the attorney represents whomever, or both parties have attorneys to represent them in the court.
They may or they may not. Most of the time when individuals file temporary, and let me backtrack, most of the time when individuals file temporary restraining orders, they usually do it on their own. So you don't need an attorney for that. If you just had an incident on, Sunday night and Monday morning, you say, I've had enough, and you get up and go to the courthouse and say, I want to file a protective order, you can go ahead and file it. And we call it temporary because, again, it's ex parte. So it's only on the word of the victim.
Okay.
And so the judge at that point will, if he says, okay, there's enough here, so I'll enter a temporary order until we can find the defendant, get him served, and bring him in. So it gives immediate protection and says that, okay, they won't be able to come within 100 feet of you. They have to leave the home. If there are children involved, it can give temporary custody to the victim.
Okay. So
it can do a lot of temporary things, custody and, use of the home, can't call, can't contact in any way, can't come to their job, can't do any of those things.
Yeah. But, so it's important that these restraining orders are done.
Definitely, because it's immediate protection. But then the regular hearing has to be set within 30 days.
Okay.
And at that point is when the defendant, hopefully, if they're able to serve him with notice, then he will be able to come into court and say, yes, I agree to it, or I object that it's all lies, none of this happened. But at that point, it's his opportunity to be heard. And then if the judge hears evidence on both sides, takes testimony from both sides, and then the judge will make a ruling, say, well, okay, I believe that this order is necessary. And then he'll issue a permanent order.
Okay. In
the permanent orders, the length of time that they are effective, it varies from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, but sometimes they're for 6 months, a year, 18 months, and all the way to 2 or 3 years. And
that is amazing. That's right. Wonderful. That's wonderful to know. And that gives some type of, I'm sure it gives some type of peace to the victim.
Right. Yeah. But it's not a time to let your guard down and I tell people, I've counseled people that often if an offender has an order executed against them, that can make them angry. That can make them angrier.
Yeah.
And it's at that time they may heighten their abuse because some people have no regard for, they don't care if they just want to get this person back. You got this restraining order against me. And so I lost my job as a result, or they're going to take my guns as a result. So sometimes that heightens their anger. So it's not a call to say, okay, well, I've got this order, so I can just rest and be at ease. You still have to take precautions because you know that individual, you know what he's capable of, you know how he operates, you know how he thinks. So you still have to be mindful of that and continue to secure your safety, the safety of your children, whether it's finding new housing, getting them enrolled in different schools. You may have to give a copy of that restraining order to their school so that they know, if you were granted custody, so that they know that he or she can't come to the school and take the children. You have just, or the daycare, you have to put them on notice, because you can't give them share those copies with individuals who need to know what's going on.
That's good information. That's really good information. Now, as far as the laws with harassment and, psychological abuse, stalking, does it vary from state to state, or is it across the board, those laws?
Well, stalking and things like that, there is protection provided for it. In situations like that, it's going to be harder to prove because, you don't have the black eyes and you don't have the broken arms.
Yeah.
Cold.
So basically, it's just your word against somebody else's.
Right. But you still can prove it. And what I tell people to do is document. I used to have to tell people to keep a log. For instance, if they're harassing you, if they're texting you 100 times a day, or repeated phone calls, driving by your home or your job or your mother's house or, wherever. Keep a log of everything. It's not coincidence that they just happen to show up. If you're at the mall, that you happen to see them, and then you're at an eating at a restaurant, and then you happen to see them. That should give you an indication that you're being followed. So document everything. Saturday, September 23rd, 6:00 p.m. drove by my house. Again, at 8 o'clock, drove by my house, and document all of the phone calls. It's very easy. It's much easier these days to document the phone calls, because most of our phones keep, the call log, and we can see all of the calls that are come in. But sometimes they may call from blocked or unknown numbers. But if all of this is occurring during this time period, it's a very easy assumption to conclude that it's that person, because you hadn't been getting those types of calls before. Mm-hmm. So document it, but don't leave it on your phone, because, things can happen with our phones, but you can go and print those logs out to show that I received 150 calls on this one day. The next day it was 75, so that's harassment. And that's, yes. Again, and it's psychological, because and it's especially if they're leaving messages, and you're already fearful. So, and it weighs on you. And if they're threatening you and saying, you better come back home, or you better drop this restraining order, or, you better do this, I'm going to take the kids, that causes, depression. It causes fear. It often causes victims to return, because it makes them feel as if they have no power. There's no way to escape. So they may as well go back, because it's better than where they are. Because, domestic violence really messes with your mind.
Yes.
You can suffer, if you've ever spoken to victims, sometimes their perception and their thinking is just not clear when they've endured abuse and trauma. Because we know that trauma, it has an effect on the mind. It has an effect on the body. Spiritually, it affects you in every type of way.
Now that takes me to
PTSD.
Yeah, you're right.
It's like people who serve, who go off to fight in wars.
Yeah, you're right. The same type of PTSD, the same type of mental illness that,
Yes.
That we see in soldiers,
Yes.
And, that brings me to the case of the Gabby Petito. And, just seeing her on TV and the turmoil she was in when when the police stopped them. Can you speak about that, what you think about that case?
Well, I did not follow it closely, but from what I read, the accounts that I read, I searched for history to see if there had been any allegations of domestic violence between the two of them prior, between she and her fiance prior to them going on this cross-country trip they were on. And I have not discovered anything like that. But when I read the account in the news where, they were at a gas station or something, and there was a fight. There was an altercation outside, and, there were witnesses to it. And, one account said that he was striking her. And there was another account that said, she was the aggressor. So, and in situations like that, often, if the police weren't there, they don't know. And so when they interviewed them, when the police got there and they talked to them, of course they said, well, we're okay. We don't need, we don't need any help. We're going to be fine. And, they got in the van and drove off together. But if you have an altercation like that, 9 times out of 10, that's not the first time something like that happened. Mm-hmm. And often victims will hide abuse, because they're embarrassed or afraid, or they can't believe it. They can't believe the person that they love is subjecting them to this type of, behavior. So often others don't know it until there is a public altercation. And again, I don't know if this is the first time, but usually, it doesn't, you usually don't start with a big fight. Yeah. It always builds up. It may start with verbal abuse, or there may be emotional abuse. But when that abuse is not confronted, it is going to escalate. And it escalates to the physical, which is what it did in this case. And it's very unfortunate, very sad story that the young lady lost her life. And until they are able to find him, there are so many unanswered questions.
Oh my gosh. I guess you can hear my silence because I'm taking in every word that you're saying. You're saying so many you're giving so many wonderful nuggets to us tonight. And, it's going to go so far because there's so many people out there who are looking for answers and don't know who to turn to. And, with domestic violence, it's such a silent thing. Whatever happens in the house stays in the house.
Stays in the house.
Yeah. So people who are listening to this podcast, this may be the only chance they'll get, because this morning Soulshine, they're never going to think, oh, I'm getting information on how to get out of this situation. Right. Mm-hmm. And so I am just so happy that you accepted my invitation to be on Morning Soulshine. And I just pray that someone who's out there who's going through would hear this and hear you giving such great information on, what to do to stay safe and how to get out. And this has just been a wonderful, wonderful interview. Is there anything else you would like to share with us?
Yeah, I just wanted to add on to the part that this Gabby was, her case was highlighted because she, had a lot of notoriety because of her, her social media presence. But if you think about the sheer numbers of men and women who are victims of domestic violence, but their voices their cases, their stories are not heard because, they're the unknown. It is mind-boggling. In the United States, more than 10 million adults experience domestic violence annually. More than 10 million. 1 in 4 women and 1 in 10 men experience sexual or physical violence or stalking by an intimate partner. And so on a typical day, domestic violence hotlines nationwide receive over 19,000 calls. And if that abuser happens to have a firearm, it increases the risk of intimate partner femicide by 400%.
Wow.
And we know that we are in the middle of the pandemic. And unfortunately, with all of the unemployment and all of the death and everything that went along with the pandemic, but domestic violence rates rose 8%. And most of that could be attributed to everyone having to quarantine at home. Everyone was at home. At one point when everything was on lockdown, you could not get away. There was no way to get out and let steam off. And as a result, domestic violence rates rose 8% in 2020.
Wow.
And so I just want people to just be aware. Everyone doesn't have the fame and the, they're not known, but just be aware, pay attention to the people around you, pay attention to friends. Are they, one of the things that abusers do is they will cut off contact with family and friends. So if you have someone who at one point, you were able to socialize with them and, go here and there, and now they can't do that. Or, if you are at a gathering, the abuser is watching them and monitoring what they say, monitoring what they do, monitoring their phone calls and monitoring everything. That's a good indication that something is going on. And unfortunately, they may never say anything. But if you sense in your spirit that something is going on, just go to them and let them know that you see them. Let them know if you need someone to confide in, I'm here. And be that confidential ear, because they need someone they can trust. Someone who can help them into safety.
As an advocate for domestic violence, I am just overwhelmed right now with joy of you sharing this information, because on a daily, I speak with people who are going through, and they don't know what to do. They don't know where to go because their livelihood is at stake. Their children are at stake, and they're just going through this abuse and don't have a way out. And just to know that somebody understands them like you, and understands the processes. It is so good to have you as an advocate with me. And thank you so much, Attorney Keys, for being with us.
Thank you so much for inviting me. If they need help, they can go to www.thehotline.org. That's the National Domestic Violence website. It's secure. And once you go onto it, it erases your search history so that if someone comes behind you, they can't know that you've been there. So www.thehotline.org for help. They're a great resource. They can help you nationwide, and they can get you information in the particular state you're in as well. Thank you so much. It's been my pleasure.
Thank you so much. And you've been listening to Morning Soulshine with Bridget and Attorney Keys, and we will talk to you on next week. Thank you so much.